the title of my today's talk say, that how to maintain the sanity of the tip of your test pyramid. So I assume that most of us are familiar with what a test pyramid is. If we are not familiar, of course, there are a couple of slides where I'll go through it, and hopefully we'll come to know that we are on the same page. So yeah, and I think let's get started. So I'll start with this beautiful picture of a beautiful door. And quick question to everyone. Any guesses that what's the global door industry worth of? Any weird guess? Which, because it just came to my mind to ask this question because it's a lovely door. How big is the door industry? Do you, can anybody just write down something or say?
It's probably
Awesome.
about
Yeah.
10 to 20
Almost 50
billion.
That's cool. I'm pretty sure that's 50 billion. Yeah. So must be a lot of money. Actually, I actually didn't know about the numbers, but it was just to grab your attention towards this door. It must be a lot of money for sure. And so, if I talk about the purpose of a door, it's just that someone can pass through it swiftly, and that's it. And that should be the purpose of the door. And if we think of it, that let's say the purpose of the door is quite obvious, then why do you think that we need these signs, whether to push a door or pull it? Why can't we make it much obvious? And if you think more of it, how do you want to pass through the door is quite insignificant. Whereas the moment we try to make it more significant by writing or posting these push or pull signs, then it's a design problem that somewhere is wrong in the design, and this is kind of a bad door because you just can't go out that, oh, do you need to pull the door or push it, whereas it should be a swift process. Yeah, another image of just these doors where we have these signs. And here is how the design problem of the doors was actually fixed. And it's quite simple. If you're putting a door, if you have a flat tile on it, it means you can't do anything other than pushing the door. It's a swift push and you go through it. If you have a handlebar to hold, it means that it asks you to pull it and go through it. If you have a knob, then you just turn it and go through it. So just by these simple things, the big design problem of the doors was fixed. And now it became more people friendly, or I should say more user friendly, how we term in our software world. But this problem of explaining how to do things versus what to do is quite common in the software world as well. And a lot of developers actually suffer with it. A lot of you must have heard that a classic example is, are we building right product versus are we building the product right? And this is quite similar to what versus how. So I also kind of encountered similar problem when I was looking at the test at Bumble, and that's where the story started. Quick formal introduction about myself. My name is Sunav Sodhani. I'm currently working as a senior QA engineer at Bumble. Those who have not heard about Bumble, we are one of the biggest dating platforms globally. So we have got millions of users. We are available in more than 190 countries, and we are translated in 50 languages. And the other one is Badoo. So these apps are available in Play Store and Apple Store. Feel free to download it. Now, when I talk about test pyramid, I should also give you more context about how and how many end-to-end tests we have at Bumble. So currently we have around 1,700 plus tests at Bumble. This is quite a long number, quite a huge number, and but we our app is quite complex. So most of these tests are the emulator tests, which are very fast for us. Other section is we have the real device test, and since we have um, we have payment features in our both the apps, so we have good amount of payment tests as well, because it's quite important for us to keep checking the payment features regularly. Let's talk about test pyramid. So this is a picture of the ideal test pyramid, which most of us would agree to, that this is what we want to achieve in our software development cycle. This, of course, is taken by Martin Fowler, the person who described this, that how this pyramid should look like. At the bottom, you have got the biggest chunk, which is and should be of the unit test. Then comes the service or integration test. And at the end, at the top, the lowest number of scenarios should be end-to-end scenarios. Like I said previously, we have around 1700 plus end-to-end scenarios. So we know that we have a huge chunk at the top of our pyramid, the top layer. So we are constantly working on maintaining the shape of the pyramid just like this, and we are constantly working on only adding limited number of end-to-end tests, and we are moving all the test coverage to the lower levels. Also, as you can see in this image, the more lower level we take a look at, those tests are much faster, and if we go towards up, the end-to-end tests are tend to be much slower. Also, on the other side, I've mentioned that the end-to-end test should actually speak out what is the purpose of test. And if we go down towards the pyramid, the unit test, let's say, they are more focusing on how we are writing the test. So as my topic suggested, I'll be talking about the tip of our test pyramid, and the tip of the test pyramid is of course our BDD scenarios. And in the BDD scenarios, I should say that our feature files. So at Bumble, we write scenarios in Kirkin syntax. We have the feature files there. Those feature files interact with the Ruby language as step definitions. The step definitions further interact with the page objects layer, and the page layer communicates with the tools which we use. And here at Bumble, we use Calabash and APM drivers. So this is actually a test scenario which we usually have at Bumble. Let me just go through it, that what the scenario is about. So this says that in order to get a new message, a user, so a newbie user, when he has already received messages from 3 different people, now a fourth person when tries to message this newly registered user, we try to show him a blocking screen that you cannot chat more, because we feel that we are the newly user is trying to get spammed, and we try to restrict more users by showing a chat button and a chat blocker with a start chatting button, that if you want to pass through this blocker, then you need to buy and go through the payment screen, buy some virtual currency, and you can start chatting. So this is a general scenario where we actually protect the new users by this chat blocker. Now, while we took a look at the scenario, I should also discuss a bit about imperative versus declarative. at these scenarios, we realize that our scenarios are focusing more on the imperative side. That we were focusing more on how to achieve a goal, whereas our focus should be more on the declarative side, which actually focuses on what is the goal. So, like I mentioned, imperative usually tells how to achieve a goal, whereas declarative actually determines that what is the goal. And if we keep these things in mind, we are more focused towards, we are more prone to avoid mistakes. Usually, we don't encounter these mistakes, but let's say when the team is big, much larger people, and the teams are involved, then believe me, there are a collaboration might go wrong. There can be various reasons behind it, that there can be different viewpoints of people. Product requirements can be interpreted differently by different people. Each test developer can have their own viewpoints towards the test. So it's very easy to miss what the goal is actually when we are focusing on how to achieve it. So consider this as a slider where we actually need to find the right balance for our end-to-end test. And at Bumble, we realized that we were more going towards the imperative side, but actually we wanted to our end-to-end scenarios, because they are the business-facing scenarios. We wanted them to be more towards the right side of the slider, which is the declarative side. Now let's take again a look at this scenario which I showed you. Um, as we tried to read it, it's not crystal clear that what's the purpose of the scenario, whereas what we expect from our end-to-end scenario is that it should speak out loud what are we building, regardless of how we are building it. And end-to-end test should express the specifications of the product requirements in a clear, understandable, concise, and self-explanatory manner. So while we take a look at this scenario, let's take much closer look at what problems this scenario had. The first problem which this test scenario had is that we don't know what is I. Is I the logged in user, or is I'm the person who is testing? Or if you look closely, there are some steps which are using a backend API to create test data. So do we refer I as the backend API? So it's not clear. We don't know what is I. And we move in the slider more towards the left side. We become more imperative. Another look at one of the steps here. So where I've pointed, the step says I add other user to visitors list. Now before this step, we have actually created, um, if you look from the top, we have created one male user, then we have created other user called Leela, and then we have created 3 new users just to create our test data. And then at a certain point, we say that I add other user to visitor list. Now we don't know which other user are we talking about. There can be multiple other users, but our end-to-end scenario doesn't tell clearly to the any third person or any business person that which other user are we talking about here. And yeah, we move more towards imperative side. Again, another thing to notice here is that the creation of users looks scattered here. So let's say we are creating all the users which we want in this scenario in 3 different places, whereas it might be all together. But this is also again the problem, that when we are focusing how to just achieve a scenario, we are more tend to forget what the actual goal is. So we adopted this style of writing. And lastly, let's even forget about being imperative or declarative. As a overall, it's not crystal clear what is the purpose of the scenario just by simply reading it, which ideally we want it to be that if we want to know the purpose of the scenario, the first thing, the first thing how to do that is just by reading it. So it should be clear to us. And it was not the case with us. Also, the problem was not only that our test scenario was imperative. Do remember my door example. The moment you start explaining that how to open the door, you are trying to expose underlying details to the person. So we need to keep our design in such a way that user knows what to do with it. And the same problem was with this scenario as well. We had to tell how to achieve our test scenario rather than what goal are we trying to achieve. So how does it affect our test design? We need to understand that the bad code also, if we are writing some bad design, it also propagates to the code beneath it. So when everything was I, we needed a way to distinguish between each I, that what is I, and thus we started storing them into some instance variables like @user ID, @other user ID, @spotlight user. Let's say we are making a user which comes on top of our spotlight. We are storing in @spotlight user, and the end result was that we ended up having scattered instance variables. Consider this another example. So user with name Leela, and the last step says I make Leela top in people nearby screen. And the code beneath this step was that we were storing this other user in an instance variable called @top user. And then we were using this instance variable to further use it in some API to do certain action. Now, let's say when I try to reuse such step in some another scenario, the stored variable just comes along with it, even when I not need it. So every time if I will use this step into some other scenario, each each time this instance variable will get initiated, and it's not mandatory that I might need it there. While fixing these issues, we also came up seeing that our steps would only work when they are in a particular order. So we had a legacy scenarios where we did not even were giving names to the user when we were creating the test data, creating the users in our feature files, and we were actually rather relying on their default name. So as you can see in this scenario, I'm creating a new user, I'm creating other user, but I've not mentioned any name here because again, previously our focus was not on what to do, but rather how to do. So it was working well for us. So for example, here, the order of steps is quite important. First, we make a user to log in. His default name is Sunav. Then let's say we want to use as Sunav. And further, we want to use this other user in our next step, which uses in a backend API. And we always used to get the last Sunav which we created. Now, the scenario will break as soon as if I will create the other user first and the first user after that. So this shows that we had the design problem in at this stage as well, and we needed to fix it. So how we actually fixed all these problems? This was by introducing role-based scenarios. We introduced role into the scenarios. Now, this is what our scenario would look like. Each user which we want to have in the test data, we create them all in our given step. That and whether we want any certain role of the user which our scenario demands, we try to give the role to the user. So in this scenario, we have a role called primary user. Then we have another user, which is a newbie user, and we have three more users which are given the role as stranger. So their role are just stranger, and stranger, as I understand, is trying to message the newbie user, and that's what happens. So the primary user role actually is the person which logs in the scenario. Then the newbie user is made a newbie via backend API. It's clearly mentioned. And then the newbie user receives some message from all the strangers. Now the next is that when the primary user tries to initiate a chat with the newbie user, he sees a blocking screen. And once he starts tapping on the start chatting button on this block, we verify that he's been taken to the payment screen for this feature. Now, gives the clarity at a glance that it becomes quite clear that what is the purpose of this scenario. Scenario is more clear and concise. It I can share the scenario with any of my product person and any business person which actually these scenarios are for, and they are easy. They will be easy to relate it that what is the overall feature which we are trying to test here. So it becomes more clear and concise. As you must have noticed, most of the given is in one place and the rest follows after it. So we try to collapse all the given, which is the given test condition for this particular scenario, at one place. All the user creation is at one place. And do we want any particular thing, like we want the primary user in this case to be verified with phone, it's all in the given step. No other users here, like in my previous example of the same scenario, we were mentioning we were creating other user, then we were doing some action with the other user. And with the role-based approach, there is no other user. So every other user which we had previously has now been mapped to a meaningful role here, which has a purpose now. And it gives more clarity and defines the purpose of the scenario much upfront. And if we compare it with our slider of imperative versus declarative, this this style of writing the test scenario is more of the declarative side, which is actually telling that what is the goal. And the goal is that the newbie users are protected by the chat blocker. And the slider goes on the right side. Also, like I mentioned, the problem which we had previously, that we were using a lot of, we were forced to use instance variables. And with this approach come in, we remove the instance variable like at the rate user ID or at the rate other user ID. And we started to use our user registry to fetch the information of the user. So any information which I want to know about the user with particular role, I simply ask my user registry that this is the user role. Please give me any information which I want to fetch for this. So where are we currently with this approach? You should keep in mind that I said in the beginning, we had 1700 plus test scenarios already. So, and these changes, when was introduced in the team, of course, any change is not taken quite soon, but slowly when people started seeing the end result of it, it became more crisp and clear, and everybody started adopting this design of writing new scenarios. So we decided in our team that all the new feature scenarios should be written in the role-based design. at least, so that the new features which we launch and which we cover in Bumble and Badoo should be tested and should be written in the new design. Also, we are currently migrating older steps in parallel. So this is a work which is going in parallel while we write new scenarios. Whenever in writing new scenarios, take care. We want to use the older scenarios. We try to migrate the older steps also in the role-based design. And this is a small image that what was the end result after some short exercise. So we till now we have come up with this number of roles in our code base, that when people started exploring more in a creative way that what role will be more meaningful for their feature scenario, then they started adding more roles in the code, that which is not, so nothing is I now. um, and we have more dedicated roles about it. As you can see, we have caller, callee, and there are multiple other roles. This was also one of the interesting question in my team, that that should we limit the number of roles which are created by everyone? And we decided that we should not limit the number of roles created in our code base as of now, because we don't want to restrict anyone to use their imagination, but at least, and this is quite an early stage for us, so we are still way to go when we will think about that we have to strict the creation of the new roles. And this brings me towards the end of my talk, actually. And I should again mention that our end-to-end scenarios are written in Kirkin, which is also a programming language. So it becomes equally important for us to maintain its sanity. And when we will maintain the sanity of the top layer, the design improvement will just flow beneath that layer as well. So hence the tip of the test pyramid is maintained too in this way. I took a couple of references and I posted them here. One of them is specification by example, which is again a great topic to read, and the other one is design by contract, which also speaks about how creative we can be, and how crisp and clear our specifications can be by when we apply specification by example principle. So it's good to read about them, and it's quite helpful. So yeah, with that, I would say that if you're not able to find the way through the door easily, please remember it's the bad door, because with good design, you can just go through and it's obvious. So thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Sunav. Appreciate we've got a limited group on here, but yeah, did anyone have any questions at all for Sunav on that presentation?
Yeah, actually, hi Sunav. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on good BDD design. I might have missed when you talked about the stack that you're using. So obviously you're using Cucumber to write the feature files and you drive Ruby. But what about on the mobile side? What library do you use for that?
So we use Calabash and APM tools for that, and also they are for the mobile test. And we also have a bunch of web tests which we use Selenium for. So yeah, Calabash and APM are going good for us, and they are doing the job for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now Bashir
Perfect.
here. Let me
Hello.
Can I? Yeah, hi. Thank you again for this presentation. So just wanted to talk to you about, I'm assuming that you're into Agile Scrum, BDD. So what is your definition of done? You know, when I say that, do the test scripts form definition of done for a particular story or end to end? How does it work really?
Well, yeah. So for us, we actually follow a QA no strategy, which might maybe surprise you or maybe not, where we actually rely that we are fixing we are pushing all the QA testing thing on the left side towards the developer's side, and we as QA engineers are making sure that whatever features are going to be released are made. They are all covered with the automation test, and also maintaining the test pyramid at the same time. So this is our role there, and I think, yeah, when we have the automation test for any new feature, they are all good up and running. That's when we can say that this is done for us.
Okay. In short, towards the end of the sprint, you do have test coverage for the feature that you have delivered in that sprint. Yeah.
Yeah, so for us, it's a simple rule that the feature is only merged into master when it is covered by test.
Okay.
And yeah, so they both, the feature and the test, both should go along together in the master.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Happy to help.
Hi, Sudeep here. I've got a question. So, what you mentioned something about the shifting left, right? What is your opinion about BDD and actually comparing that to perhaps test-driven development? Would you see any reason why QA should be automating the test and not developers? What would be the purpose of QA here if the requirements can be automated directly in a TDD format?
Well, yeah, like I said, we have been constantly the whole project, which is called QA No, is mainly focusing that there should not be any need for the QA engineers, and everything should be a feature which is actually developed by a developer should also be tested by the developer, and it should be all good. But at the same time, we also realize that the QA is only here to help the developers. So there are a lot of scenarios which we actually still want to be covered by the end-to-end test. Let's say if I talk about any push notification scenario which I want to test for my new feature, and we try to cover it using our end-to-end scenario, and the that's when our help comes in. We pitch in to the developer that, okay, if we are talking about testing push notification, let's write an end-to-end scenario for it and test it. Payment scenario, payments features are also, like I said, quite important for us because they generate revenue for us. So we make sure that we have sufficient amount of end-to-end tests which are testing the payment features. So yeah, this is only here to help, and it's the developer's responsibility for the feature and for the quality of the feature.
So do you think it's a lack of skill of developers to understand what testing coverage should be, or is it their test design techniques they lack? What is it that the QA is topping up that developers are not able to do?
Well, yeah, like I said, developers are more focusing in writing their unit test and integration test by mocking the server or and like that. So they are more covering. They are actually helping us to get all the test coverage down the test pyramid by putting them into unit test and the integration test as well. But as a QA engineers, what we are topping up it with some very limited end-to-end scenarios, which actually cannot be covered by unit or integration test, where we actually need to see that the end-to-end flow is actually correct or not, which also helps us to save the regression as well. And that's when we top up that part.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yes.
Excellent. Anyone else with further questions? No, perfect. I think that's looks like it's it. Thank you very much again, Sunav, for the presentation. Really insightful, and yeah, good to get an insight into what's been working for you at Bumble. Thanks everybody for the questions. Like Sunav mentioned at the beginning, this is the last talk for 2020 for us. We do have our QA coffee morning, so tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. we'll be getting together and discussing hiring QA and test engineers during a pandemic, looking at it from a hiring perspective. So obviously if you're a hiring manager, it would be beneficial from that side, but also touching on the candidate experience as well, so maybe useful